Well, hello, everyone, and welcome back to The Path for episode 60. Here we are, 60 episodes in. I am Jason.
Hey, I'm Derrick.
We are so glad that you've decided to join us on The Path this week. We're going to be finishing up our Missions Month episodes this week. We have a really special guest in Kevin Williams, who's the current president of the Georgia Baptist Convention. And we encourage you to stick around for that. He shared some really great opportunities that we can have to potentially partner in some missions in the days ahead. But before we do that, Derrick, we're going to look at Titus Chapter 2 that we looked at yesterday as we continue on in our series called Letters. And so maybe just a little recap, and then what's the handle to hold on to this week?
Yeah, so Paul continues talking to Titus, writing to him, the gist, kind of all the letters, and I don't know that we even prepared for this ahead of time, but it kind of has fleshed out that the idea is that these people writing these personal letters are writing them to people to encourage them to continue the faith after they're, once they're gone or whatever. And Titus is one of Paul's proteges. He's planted churches. He's sent Titus to encourage them and equip them, and he's given them some instructions on how to do that. But the idea is this idea of needing to intentionally pass on our faith, right? And we talked about last week the state of the Bible study that kind of showed that less than half of Christians, professing Christians, are living out their faith. Yeah, and that's because we aren't passing it down well, and so we've got to do better. And so that's what we see continuing here. Titus is a perfect candidate to pastor because Paul knows that there's this group of people he calls the Judaizers, and some translations call them the circumcision party. And it's this group of seemingly converts. Maybe they converted at one time, but then false doctrine had kind of slipped in, and they're like, no, you gotta add circumcision to Jesus. Like there's not just Jesus, you got to add stuff to it. Right. And so there's very legalistic, very religious based, and what can I do to earn my salvation? Yeah. And so they attributed salvation level importance to behaviors, where salvation only comes from the Lord. Right. Salvation only comes from Jesus. And so Paul is encouraging Titus, not only is Paul passing that on to him, he's encouraging Titus to pass it on to others, and then for Titus to encourage others to pass it on to others. And so you see this, and what you see particularly is in chapter 2 is the importance of living righteously, right? Yeah. So yesterday we talked about how righteousness comes to us. Paul says, my righteousness is as filthy rags. And Paul was a Pharisee of the Pharisees. He was Christian,
Jew of Jews,
follower of God, a follower of God's. I mean, he held the letter of the law and all that. And so he finally came to recognize, I can't do anything to attain my righteousness. Right. Righteousness is an imparted thing or imputed thing. Some scholars call it an alien righteousness. It's not our own. Yeah. It's given to us at salvation by Jesus. So when we come to faith in Christ, the imputed righteousness, the alien righteousness, and alien just means it's not ours. Yeah. It's foreign. The righteousness is put upon us. Yeah. Scripture tells us that we are clothed in righteousness, right? One of my favorite songs sings that, dressed in his righteousness alone, faultless, I stand before the throne. I can't stand faultless before the throne. Right. In my own righteousness. Yeah. I stand before the throne of God because I'm clothed with Jesus' righteousness. So we talked about that. So what happens is these Judaizers and others like it, and it still happens in churches all over the world today, they have attributed salvation level importance to quote unquote righteous living. So like I have to live righteously to earn salvation. Yeah. That's not how it works. I have been given imputed righteousness so that it will affect my living and cause me to live righteously. And that's what you see here. Titus is Paul is instructing Titus to tell older men, older women to impart righteous living and pass it on to younger generations, that they would live in being clothed in the righteousness of Christ, but then live it out.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the idea, and that idea of intentionality is key. It doesn't just happen.
Yeah.
Though the righteousness of Christ sits on us, it's we're clothed in that. We still have to live in that.
Yeah. We
still have to make conscious decisions to live in that righteousness. And so, Paul says, he tells every group, older, and it's interesting, he addresses older men first, then older women, then younger women, than younger men. That's fascinating to me. It's kind of chiastic in a way. And chiasm is a literary device where you start with a similar thing and end with a similar thing, and you kind of different levels meet, and it kind of causes a pyramid. So it's chiastic in nature. Older men, older women, younger women, younger men. But every single segment, and even he addresses slaves later, they're called to live self-controlled lives. Yeah. Self-controlled lives, which we talked a good bit about in our previous series.
Right.
So we didn't get into that as much because, the world says live however you want to. That's the good life. But the good life, according to Jesus and God's Word, is live a life that's self-controlled.
Right.
Live a life that's sensible, Paul says. It's kind of subdued and not really, just kind of easygoing. There's not a lot to it. It's just live your lives sensible, self-controlled, live it righteously, he says. And so, to do that, we certainly need Jesus to do that in us and through us. It's not something we can attain to our own, because then we make the switch of giving salvation level importance or emphasis to our living, saying we are earning our salvation. No, we are living our lives righteously because we are clothed in the righteousness of Christ. And Paul goes into that greatly, but he gives us a so that, right? Yeah. So live your lives self-controlled so that, and he says it several times. Yeah. So I've talked a lot. You may have a question or thought or
no. It's all really good. It's so true. I think that it's, on the surface level, you could look at this and be like, well, we're arguing over semantics here, but we're not. Yeah. Because it has a huge impact on the state of our thoughts and the state of our heart. When if you're thinking in your mind, I want to live righteously, so maybe you start with good intentions, but your ultimate result is that you think you're gaining something.
Right.
I'm going to work my way up that I'll make God happier by what I do. And that could not be further from the truth. Right. And yet, we're all guilty of that at times. Like we fall victim to that line of thought. And the distinction that Paul is making here for Titus, and he makes it several other places in the New Testament too, is that no, you are living that way because of what has already taken place in your heart.
That's right. Because
of what Jesus did. Now, therefore, that's who you are. You're a follower of Christ. Followers of Christ live this way. Yeah. And it's not like a light switch is flipped and you just understand how to do that from day one. And that's why I love that Paul, not only is he talking about this righteous living and sound teaching and all that stuff, but he's building the body of the church at the same time, because it's, hey, you older men and older women, you've lived enough life and hopefully you've lived long enough as a follower of Christ to understand this a little better. Pour that into these younger guys and girls that have not lived as much life as you, and they've not experienced the things that you've experienced. Help them to understand. And I think that's referred to as discipleship, if I'm not mistaken. And so I love that Paul, while he's teaching Titus, he's also building the church as well. I mean, Christ is building the church through him, but you understand what I'm saying, that it's placing the structure in place to continue this line of thought, that this legacy of here's how we live in the body of Christ. And I think that it's so important for us to grasp that it is an action. Paul's not talking about a thought that it's just there and it happens. No. It takes work. We have to do it. We're not passive in our faith. We are active in our faith and in our righteous living. And I think it's just, to me, it's beautiful to see that played out. And I think that you see that here at Lafayette first, then in some cases, but I want to see it grow more.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
I want to see it grow more. That let's have, older pouring into younger pouring into older, and it's just this beautiful amalgam of people that have been changed by Christ, and therefore it affects the way we live, and that is what the church was made to be. This beautiful picture of how good Jesus is, and it gets me excited to think about it like
absolutely,
that.
yeah. And so, verse 14, Paul. So you're speaking here about this beautiful dance that happens, of God working, and we're intentionally following His leadership, right? So you're right. God's going to build His church, but Paul's doing what he needs to do. He's telling Titus to do what he needs to do, and he's telling Titus that he needs to make sure that others are doing what they need to do, so that God can put it together.
Absolutely.
God's doing the work, but He's using you and I to make it happen, and our obedience and intentionality.
I was going to say, it's not like God doesn't ask us to come and jump in the bed of His truck and just ride along with Him. No, He invites us to work alongside Him. And I think so often we think, oh, well, yeah, I'm just along for the ride. I'm with God. I'm just going to go wherever He goes. And that's a great place to start. But you have to make the next step, too, where God says, hey, I'm inviting you in to work alongside me here. I'm the one that's doing the work. I'm the one that's providing all the resources, all the energy, and I'm the one who will ultimately get the glory. But I'm inviting you in to do this with me, not to watch me do it.
Yeah, and eventually we'll get to ride in the bed of His truck. But right now we've got to build the road, and He's providing the supplies. We're making it. We're building it.
Yeah.
Some people are putting the parts of the truck together to be ready to drive.
Yeah.
God is the owner of it all, and He's like, hey, we're doing this, and I want you to be a part. But you're right. And then eventually the road will be done, the truck will be prepared, and we can ride it.
Absolutely.
To use your analogy. Yeah. Well, Titus 2:14, He gave Himself up. Paul's talking about Jesus. For us, to redeem us from all lawlessness, and to cleanse for Himself a people for His own possession. So He is building His church. He's building a thing. So this happened yesterday, and it gives you a glimpse of how this could be fleshed out.
Yeah.
Because I think that's what this podcast is about, show you how to flesh it out. I would say the way you flesh it out, how do you pass on righteous living intentionally? Be a part of one of our 7 ministry teams. Yeah. Be a part of a group. Be a part of a D group. Invest your life into someone else. Use your talents for the Lord. So we have something called Belong, and we do it ever so often, probably about once a quarter. It's a class. It's a 3-week class where we invite new people to our church, visitors, guests, people just maybe interested in Christianity, and we take them on a 3-week journey, and it ends with us helping them see how God has shaped them so that they can serve. Now, God built His church. God brought those people to our church. God worked in their heart and life individually at other places. And we had 4 families converge into this class. Now, they could come to this church and come and sit each week and listen to the message, and they might stick for a while. But if we didn't have the intentional means for them to do that, but in the long class, would they know how to get plugged into a ministry?
Yeah.
Would they know how to grow in their faith in a connect group? They might not.
Yeah.
They may just walk in our doors, come sit in a pew, and then leave and go home.
Yeah.
And never get that fuller understanding of how they can follow the Lord and live out their life righteously, to use the example. So it takes God working. God did the work in their heart and brought them here to be a part of our body and to fulfill something no one else here can. I think that's how God designs His body. He brings them in. That's Ephesians 4, it's 1 Corinthians 12, it's Romans 12. But we've got to do the intentional work of saying, hey, what are your strengths? What's your spiritual gifting? How has God used you in the past? How does God want to use you now? And say, we need this ministry done. We need this will be a great place for you. We need you to plug in here. This will be awesome. Come and be a part of this. And so we've done the intentional work while God's done the intentional work. Yeah. And in the end, we're passing on a legacy, building a mechanism that more people, to use your analogy before, can get in the truck and ride.
Yeah.
With the Lord, and so that's huge. I mean, that's important.
Absolutely, yeah, I totally agree with you. I think that it's such a vital part, and I think so often we get stuck at the, well, yeah, let me just float along here, and this was not. And this is getting into a bigger conversation, but the Christian life was never intended to be an addendum to your life. It is your life,
right?
And I think so often we get stuck at that. Well, yeah, I'll add this piece of Christianity to my life, as opposed to it being the thing that drives everything else,
right?
And I think that it takes work, like you said. It's intentionality. It does not happen passively, but the reward in the end and the result is so much. It is absolutely worth all the work that you have to do on the front end to live out our faith.
Absolutely.
So, well, one way that we live out our faith is by being involved in mission work. And this week we have an interview with Kevin Williams, like I said, who is the current president of this Georgia Baptist Convention. And we would encourage you to listen to this interview. He has some great thoughts and some great opportunities to be involved in mission work. And so check out this interview, and then we will be back in just a little bit to wrap everything up. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are very honored today to have the current president of the Georgia Baptist Convention with us, Mr. Kevin Williams. Kevin, thank you so much for taking time to be with us today.
Okay. I'm glad to be with you. Excited.
Great. So if you wouldn't mind, just take a few minutes and tell us a little bit about yourself and about your ministry there in Villa Rica.
Well, I've been there exactly 8 years this past Sunday.
Oh, wow. Congratulations.
8-year anniversary. A lot of people knew about us or knew about me from we did the baptisms on the football field in 2014, and evidently the whole world got involved with that. So there was as far as me, my background is I have my doctorates in church growth, missions, and evangelism. So I did all those at Southern. And so my whole premise has been church growth and what catalysts promote that. And so I was a youth pastor, an associate pastor, and the description that you're the worship leader, right? Is that what you told me?
That's right.
Okay. Yeah. That little last line on there, and all other duties assigned by the pastor. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I had all of those. So I just did whatever I was told to do. But I kind of had a vision for when I would, if and when ever God would let me be the pastor of a church. My vision was going to be, we were going to engage in missions. And because I saw the all around benefit that would impact the church, not just in a one time, one hit wonder. This would be an ongoing driver. So for me, missions was all about, let's see if we can get everybody engaged. So when I started at First Villa Rica, the whole goal for me was to say, okay, how can I get my church engaged in missions? And they asked that question when I went there, what is your missions vision? Well, while I was still as the associate pastor and youth pastor at First Baptist Douglasville, we had gone on a mission trip, and I took 132 students. I'd like to do that to Guatemala.
Wow. Yeah.
It was like herding cats. But and students don't sleep, so I was exhausted throughout that week. And so while we were there, there's a guy there named Pastor Jose Angel Samal, and he is like the grand poobah down there. I mean, he is the guy. I call him the Billy Graham of Guatemala. And so he came to me the last day we just finished, and we were at this place called Lake Atitlan. And it's on Google's top 10 places on earth. It's beautiful. It's got 3 volcanoes, and it's got a big lake that looks about like the Sea of Galilee. It's about the same size.
Wow.
So we were there, and he put his arm around me, and he said, he pointed across the lake at this little dot, this little city across the lake. I could barely see it. And he said, no church. And I was like, okay. And he said, well, I don't know what to do with that, but he said, that's my home. And so when I went back to Douglasville after that meeting, I really wasn't thinking too much else about that because I knew I wasn't the senior pastor and I wasn't going to be able to launch that vision with that church. So I just went back and kind of, okay. So the very next week after I got back from Guatemala is when Bill Ricca contacted me and said, we'd like to talk to you about being our senior pastor. That's a long story in itself, but I go there and bottom line, they asked me this question: what is your missions vision? And I said, oh, we're going to plant a church.
Yeah.
San Juan La Laguna at Lake Atitlan. And so there's a church there. I mean, there's a city there with no church. And so it's Mayan Indians. And sure enough, within 3 weeks, we were on the ground.
Wow.
We went up on a plane and flew back down there, went across that lake and walked that ground for the very first time and saw where, and I actually, we picked out some property. And now we got to remember the church was not financially stable when I went there at all. And anyway, so let's buy this property. And so we bought it, and it was $36,000 for the property, which, you know, if it's on the side of a volcano looking down over this beautiful lake, I mean, it was really cool. So we got a pastor from another area, brought him there. It's a cool story in itself because he's the voice of the radio of the lake.
Oh, wow.
Everybody knows him, already knew him. So it was really helpful. And so we planted this church, and fast forward now 8 years, and I have personally baptized 69 of them, the 69 Mayan Indians in the lake.
Wow.
And there's literally no church there. There was a Catholic presence, but no Protestant presence. So anyway, we go in, and now it's doing very well. And the church is running about 250, 260 people, somewhere around in there. And but just we've built this big building there. They call it the temple. But anyway, so we built this church, and I got real excited, and I started bringing some other my pastor friends with me, just guys I knew. I said, man, y'all got to come down here and see this. This is unbelievable. So we took them, and then out of that, we've planted a total of 12 churches now.
Wow.
And so it's been like, and that's other churches. That's not us. We helped them get it going and then handed it off.
Yeah.
So for me, there's still the main church. We call it the mothership, and that's where we go. And I still go there every year, take our people. Now, what's cool, there were about 240 people at First Villarica when I went there. And we have taken more people, physical bodies, to Guatemala than we had in the pews the first Sunday I preached it. So we've taken well over 300, probably around 350 to Guatemala. Happened is it is permeated in our church. Exactly what I had studied and hoped would happen took off. The evangelism side, because you got to think when you're doing mission work and you're on the ground, you know, we all live off, and as a pastor, you know, you live off those 5 principles: evangelism, missions, worship, you know, ministry, and discipleship. We work off all of that.
Yeah.
So if you take a bunch of people on a mission trip, you're getting all 5 principles at one time.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so they caught the vision of it. Well, that then spilled over into our local community, and we're just doing everything. I mean, you name it, we're doing it. From feeding police and all the school teachers. We fed 7 schools recently, all the teachers. We take gift cards to all the teachers. I mean, we're doing all kinds of stuff with the fire department, police department, EMTs. We took on a whole floor of the hospital, and we feed them monthly. And man, it's just, we're taking care of the high school sports, and we sponsor them. And we feed the band, and we feed the team, and we feed the cheerleaders, and the cheerleaders actually practice in our building now.
Wow.
So it's pretty cool. There's a lot of neat things going on, but it all goes back. We have a soup kitchen, a food pantry, all these things that God's just opened doors, and we got people serving everywhere. And they have taken ownership. So the catalyst behind this whole thing, to me, is missions. So that's the driver. So that ain't, I hope that kind of sums it up for you, but that's kind of where I'm at with it.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah, it's very helpful. Just, I think, the idea you said you got people serving everywhere, and that's, so important, is to get people owning it, not just, paying, money, putting money in a plate, but really getting their hands dirty, as well. So yeah, thank you so much. That's a very cool story to see how God has worked through missions there at First Baptist Villarica.
Yeah, it's been a blessing.
That's awesome. So what would you say, because I'm sure that at a church like First Baptist Villarica, you have people who are more involved in missions than others. But what would you say to the person who says, well, I've not been called to missions, or I don't have time for that? What would you say to that person?
Well, I've had people say that to me.
Yeah.
And I try not to be sarcastic or anything, but I always, when I'm preaching, and I'll use it this way, I will tell them, all of us have a mandate. There's not one of us. We're all talking about mandates all over the country right now. But I'm talking about our call, the Great Commission. We weren't given the option. It was a mandate. Now, that mandate may mean that you're doing that at where you work, or you're doing that at your school, or you're doing that maybe in the state somewhere. Maybe you're doing something local. I mean, and here's the deal: everybody can serve somewhere.
Yes.
Yeah.
And even our senior adults, I mean, they're coming to me saying, what can we do? Well, we're about to take an 85-year-old with us to Guatemala. She's never been on a mission trip.
Wow.
So they're wanting to get involved. So, I mean, from children all the way across, there's nobody exempt from the call, on the mission call. And so I teach our people those things, and, they don't really ask me that anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
You know where you stand on it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm not ugly about it. And I don't try to be. I just try to be encouraging to them and say, hey, you can do this. It may not be to the level over here who's going down there building a house in Guatemala. You may not be the doctor who goes with us on the trip and is handing out medicine and treating people. You may not be the one that goes to Guatemala at all. You may be the one that's right here at home. And sometimes that is giving. Sometimes we have some that can't go, and they give that others can go.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there's that element. And so, I just try to say, find your place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where do you fit?
That's good.
And maybe it's praying for the team. Maybe you're a prayer warrior. There's so many ways to get involved. But just the fact that they do get involved is the most important part to it.
That's great.
Everybody's buying in.
Yeah. That's a great word.
Hey, look, and I don't want to sit here and be crazy. You guys know, I mean, y'all are in the church. It's not 100% participation,
Sure.
But we're probably far and above most churches.
Yeah.
As far, so that's what I would say.
That's good.
So, from speaking as the president of the Southern Baptist, of the Georgia Baptist Convention, what are some ways that we could encourage our people here in Lafayette to get involved in missions from a denominational standpoint?
Well, we just did that missions tour, and every region, the way they've set that up, Buck Birch and Thomas Hammond, the way they have it structured is every single region has a placement. Now, if that's in everybody, and we were real cautious on this on the mission tour, because you didn't want to henpeck somebody and say, look, this is what you have to do. because that's really up to every church, what they want to do. But here's what, we laid out a place for people to get involved. There was a zip code that was in Georgia. You could go there. There was somewhere to serve in the United States. There was somewhere to serve overseas. There was somewhere for you to serve locally. So, I mean, it was all put together in a very good fashion for somebody maybe you've never done it before to get involved. But then I was also, as the president, I was pushing another angle for pastors and leaders of churches to go with me on a vision trip down to Guatemala, Honduras, Panama, one of those countries down there that you may want to see, Costa Rica. We have vision trips set up for those countries for pastors. Mm-hmm. And anybody, if the pastor says, "Hey, I want to bring 4 or 5 people with me," okay, that's fine. We just go down and you see it. Mm-hmm. And I'm telling you, put hands on it. It's like you said a while ago, you get your hands dirty, you get in there, you see it, and then you come back and you bring those 3 or 4 leaders with you, or 2 or 3 leaders, whatever it is. And those leaders begin to go, "Man, we can do this."
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so then it becomes your church's own thing. No matter what that is, it becomes your church's. It becomes their baby, they want to handle it. So I think it's just putting their hands in it. So
great. Yeah. I think that's a great word. I think so often, because when I was younger, I went through this same mentality of where you hear this concept of missions and it seems like this huge thing that's so involved, and it can be. I mean, God does call people to uproot themselves and their families. But I think that so often we make it more mysterious than it actually is. Mm-hmm. That it's just people have this thing in their mind of, I can't be involved in something that big, but it really starts as simple as let me pray for somebody who is going on a mission trip, mm-hmm. or let me serve the police officers in my community. Mm-hmm. I mean, it can be as simple as that. That's a great reminder, Kevin.
Yeah, or just walk across the street in my neighborhood. Yeah,
exactly.
It's great.
One other thing I'd point out, and I didn't say this on every part of the tour, but I will say this: I think there's 2 different approaches to missions altogether. There's one I call the shotgun approach, where it's scattered. Mm-hmm. That means every year you're just trying to go somewhere. Mm-hmm. And that's more like, for me, that's more like, hey, let's go see the world. Hey, I love that too. Let's go see things and do things. However, there's the rifle approach.
Yeah.
And that's the one I'm taking, where we keep shooting the same spot over and over and over. And we've really kind of taken over a whole city. Mm-hmm. And to the point where the mayor of the city gave us the key to the city, which then led to a meeting with the president of the country, which then led to a whole bunch of other things. I mean, it was just unbelievable. But we kept shooting the same spot. Had we gone in there once and left, and that's what you call the one-hit wonder, And I don't know. I don't like that approach. I think you got to build relationships, and it takes time. All the things that we've done didn't happen in a year. It happened over 8 years. So it just took time to develop, and we're still developing. Mm-hmm. So, we're trying to expand that and do more, but we're still keeping that same approach.
Well, that's what I really like, that where Georgia Baptist Convention is going with, regional ministry. And then, we had Keith Ivey as an interview as well, because he's over our particular area in our region. And so, I love that they're making partnerships with specific areas to do exactly what you're saying, to make the shotgun approach. Because I agree with you. I think building those relationships in those areas is going to give you longer lasting power, longer lasting ministry opportunities than just do, and I've been on mission trips to, anywhere and everywhere, and it's been great and fun, but, we never went back, we met people that were dear to our heart in that moment, but you never really see them again. And I love that idea of going to a place and getting to know the people, getting to know God's people there, the churches, and partnering with them in the ministry that they already know needs to happen. I love that. I think I love that approach. I think it's going to be very cool to see, 10 years from now, how that shakes out, not only in your congregation, but in congregations all over Georgia that make those partnerships, and to see how God uses that in multiplying unreal kind of way. So,
I'll tell you this, probably one of the coolest things that I've witnessed personally going back and forth. We work with a school down there, and the school, when I say they give you the school, it's like, here you go. You get the school for the week, and the teachers just step back and let you take over.
wow.
So we got built-in vacation Bible school is what we got. 600 kids.
Wow.
And, so I mean, now the other schools in the area got jealous and said, hey, why won't y'all come over here? So we're doing like 3 or 4 schools now.
Wow.
Per day.
Wow.
And we're only taking 40 and 50 people. So I mean, it's like, oh my gosh. I mean, we're spread thin.
Yeah.
But the ministry is incredible. But here's the story. So we pull in, we get off the bus, and I got there in front of the team. But they had all the kids in an assembly downstairs waiting.
Oh, wow.
And so it's kind of like an enclosure. I mean, it's the best way I can tell you. It's you go in through one gate, and then it opens up in the middle. And so the center is open to the sky, but then all around it's the classrooms. So you go in that gate, and all those kids were in there. And I got there before the team did. So when I turned the corner, that the scripture says when Jesus went into Capernaum, says there was a noise about the place.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus was in the house.
Mm-hmm.
And man, I turned that corner, really like a buzz, like you could hear a buzz and a humming sound.
Wow.
And it was those kids. And they were all up on their seats, turning around looking, but they were looking for our team. They were waiting because we have such a great relationship. Those kids know our people.
Wow.
And they cry. I mean, it is.
Oh, wow.
But it's like this. There was a noise about the place.
Wow.
When we walked in. I mean, it gives me chills, but it was unreal. So that's the kind of thing that happens over time. That doesn't happen in a one-time trip.
No, yeah.
So that's what I'm talking about. That's the rifle, man. You just keep shooting that target. I mean, this is great. So anyway, I would recommend anybody, if you're going to get involved, pick a spot and work on it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah.
Very cool. Cool. Well, Kevin, thank you so much for taking time to be with us today on the Path podcast. We appreciate your leadership from a state level, and we appreciate your leadership as a pastor and a fellow worker of the gospel. And so thank you for taking time to be with us today.
Well, man, it's my honor to serve, and I love you guys. And if any way I can help you, let me know.
All right. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Go to Guatemala with me.
Absolutely.
All right. Y'all take care.
Thanks.
Yeah. Take care. You too.
All right. Bye-bye.
All right. Well, again, thank you, Kevin, for being on the podcast. We appreciate it so much. We hope that you learned something from Kevin about what's going on here in the state of Georgia and abroad as far as mission work is concerned. And while this is our last episode for this month that we're devoting to Missions Month here at Lafayette First, that does not mean that we stop thinking about missions moving forward. Missions is a part of our DNA here at Lafayette First, and hopefully you've seen these bracelets that we're wearing. They say to the ends of the earth, and that is where God has called us to carry the gospel, to the ends of the earth. And so if you don't have one of these bracelets, we still have some. They're free. You can come get one. It's just a reminder to make missions a part of your life and to let your prayers be about advancing the mission that God has given us. We'd encourage you to grab one of those and then continue to think about how God might use you in missions in the days ahead, and whether that's locally here in our town, because we've seen those opportunities, or whether that is across the country or around the globe. I don't know what God's calling you to, but I would encourage you to be faithful to answer the call when He does call you. But thank you for joining us this week. If you have any thoughts that you'd love to share with us or questions, you can email us at thepath@lafayettefirst.life, and we would love to interact with you there. But until next time, I am Jason.
I'm Derrick.
And go Braves, and we hope that you will join us next time as we continue down the path.